911, what's your emergency?
There's 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
What would you do if your child was locked in a burning house and no one would save them? April 19th, 1993. In Waco, Texas, that nightmare became real, as 25 children were left to burn alive inside a church under siege. David Koresh promised them salvation. Instead, he led them to fire and death. But how did a self-proclaimed prophet turn a small congregation in Texas into a battlefield against the U.S. government? For the children inside Mount Carmel, this wasn't just a building. It was their world, their playground, their home. They never chose to be there. They were born into a prophecy. David Koresh told their parents that leaving meant betraying God. So the doors stayed locked, and those children grew up believing safety only existed within those walls. When the fire came, they weren't hostages of strangers. They were prisoners of faith. And the people outside, men in tanks with gas and guns, they didn't see children. They saw enemies. No one rushed in to save the children. No one protected them or ran in to carry them out. Survivors vividly remember the sounds of that day. The coughing, crying, fists pounding on locked doors, and then silence. Later, investigators found melted toys fused into the floor, tiny bodies curled together in bunkers that had become tombs. The children of Waco didn't die for God. They didn't die for justice. They died in fear, in smoke, in fire, because no one saved them or cared to try.
Screaming at me, "Where are the kids? Where are the kids?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I haven't seen any of the kids."
Most people think Waco was just another disaster. A cult gone wrong, a standoff gone too far, an ending written in fire and smoke. But the truth runs deeper. Waco isn't only about what happened in 1993. It's about the stories we're told, and the stories that are left out when it's inconvenient to those in power. And here's the part most people miss. That same clash between power, fear, and the stories we're fed hasn't gone away. It's still here, in our schools, colleges, news reports, and on every screen we look at. By the end of this story, we won't just revisit the children of Waco. We'll ask why their shadows still lingers, and why even now it refuses to fade. So let's look deeper into what happened. Imagine being 6 years old, locked in your bedroom, as tanks grind through your front yard and smoke pours under the door. April 19th, 1993. At dawn, FBI tanks rolled forward. Steel treads tore through fences. Walls splintered like matchsticks. Canisters of CS gas hissed into bedrooms and hallways. Agents believed the Davidians would stumble out, choking, but they didn't. Inside, children pressed wet towels to their faces. Mothers whispered prayers, their eyes stinging, their lungs burning.
It's not the fact that you die, it's how you die. Some people die quickly, some people die slowly.
Koresh told them to stay. Deliverance was coming. Minutes later, fire. Flames erupted in several places, racing along the dry wooden walls. Survivors said the sound wasn't a crackle. It was a roar, like a freight train bearing down on them. On live television, millions watched as black smoke billowed high into the Texas sky. The compound collapsed in a tidal wave of fire. When the flames died, 76 people were gone. 25 of them were children. Clive Doyle, survivor. I had to run through flames. I didn't think I'd make it. Behind me, I could still hear children crying. But who was the man they trusted so completely that they stayed, even as their children burned? He was born Vernon Howell, a poor, dyslexic boy who never fit in. But he remade himself as David Koresh, the self-proclaimed Lamb of God who convinced parents to hand him their daughters and their souls. As a child, Vernon was mocked, unwanted. Words confused him. Music did not. With a guitar in his hands, he found power, the ability to hold people's attention. By the 1980s, he had become David Koresh, a name stitched together from King David and Cyrus the Great. He preached apocalypse with hypnotic certainty. Only he said, could open Revelation's 7 seals.
You're gonna see whether you believe this message. I'm ready to be delivered. I'm ready to go to the portals of darkness and death, and you're not. Let's see if you believe the message after so many years.
To disobey him was to defy God. His followers gave him everything, their homes, their money, even their daughters. Koresh declared himself the only husband, the only father. Every child born at Mount Carmel belonged to him. Mark Brio, former follower. He told us to disobey David was to disobey God, and we believed it. Why did they follow?
He was incredibly charismatic.
I waited patiently on the Lord.
He was spellbinding.
He was a God in the human flesh.
They would do anything for this man.
Even unholy acts.
How many young girls did he have sex with?
I'm thinking at least 10.
He was a Jesus Christ who could drink and smoke and love guns and rock and roll, but he was going to bring about the end of times.
Because Koresh offered what so few could: certainty. He gave meaning to suffering, order to chaos, destiny to despair. And certainty, even when it destroys, is intoxicating. By 1993, more than 100 people had surrendered their lives to him. And when federal agents arrived, his followers didn't see lawmen. They saw Babylon, the enemy of God's chosen. But Koresh wasn't the only one claiming divine authority. Outside his gates, another power prepared to act like God too: the United States government.
Good evening, friends. It has been over 36 hours now since federal agents first confronted a heavily armed religious cult near Waco. They were met by a hail of gunfire, killing 4 of the agents and wounding over a dozen others.
What happens when the world's most powerful government turns its weapons on its own citizens? February 28, 1993. The ATF stormed Mount Carmel to arrest Koresh on weapons charges. But the Davidians had been tipped off. Gunfire exploded. 4 ATF agents killed, 6 Davidians dead.
Before the shooting was over, at least 6 people, 4 ATF agents and 2 cult members lay dead.
To this day, no one knows who fired first. The raid collapsed. A siege began. The FBI took over. Night after night, floodlights lit the compound like a stage. Armored engines rumbled, shaking the ground. Loudspeakers blared recordings of rabbits being slaughtered, of babies crying, of Nancy Sinatra singing, "These boots are made for walking." Inside, children covered their ears and sobbed. Mothers tried to calm them, whispering hymns through the noise. Gary Nusner, FBI negotiator: "I kept telling them, this pressure is making things worse." But no one was listening. Negotiators begged for patience. Tactical commanders wanted force. And inside, Koresh pointed to it all. "See, Babylon is attacking us." Every spotlight, every scream, confirmed his prophecy. For the adults, it was scripture fulfilled. For the children, it was torment. And night after night, fear hardened into destiny. The children weren't being rescued. They were being prepared for sacrifice. When the fire came, the children had nowhere to run. Faith chained them inside. The government buried them alive. The blaze spread faster than anyone imagined. Doors had been locked, escape tunnels collapsed under tank treads, tear gas suffocated lungs before flames even touched skin.
We banked on the fact that the parents, through a natural parental instinct, once that tear gas started to be inserted into that location, would move heaven and earth to get their kids out of there. I would, but we were wrong.
Some children died clinging to their mothers. Others suffocated together in bunkers, bodies piled in desperate embraces. When investigators entered the ruins, they found melted toys fused into the floor, tiny bones scattered in ash. Senator Joe Biden, 1995 testimony. The children of Waco were not combatants. They were victims, and we failed them.
David Koresh and the Davidians set fire to themselves and committed suicide.
Koresh was found with a bullet in his head. Suicide? Murder by a follower? No one knows. But his death wasn't the story. The children's deaths were. They didn't die for God. They didn't die for justice. They died in silence, sacrificed to pride. And when the ashes cooled, America demanded answers. But the truth would prove darker than the fire itself. After Waco, the fire spread, and so did the darkness. Into politics, into rage, into conspiracy. The FBI swore they never fired a shot.
As soon as we saw the smoke, my instructions became a request. And as that fire built, the request became a plea. David, don't do this.
Survivors swore otherwise. Infrared video showed flashes from FBI positions.
There's no doubt in my mind that the Branch Davidians struck the individual matches that set that compound on fire.
The government said the Davidians lit the fire. Survivors called it murder. Hearings dragged on. Answers dissolved into shadows. Sheila Martin, survivor. They said they were protecting us, but they killed my children. Who protects us from them? Waco became more than a tragedy. It became a symbol. Militias grew. Conspiracies flourished. Timothy McVeigh stood in its ruins before bombing Oklahoma City. Trust in government crumbled. For millions, Waco proved the state could kill its own citizens and then hide it. The children of Waco never had a choice, but we do. How much power will we give to a man who claims to speak for God? And how much will we surrender to a government that acts like it is God? Most people think Waco ended in fire, but the truth is, it never ended at all. Back then, Koresh had his prophecy. The government had its mission. The cameras had their headlines. And caught in between were ordinary families, erased by the story bigger powers wanted to tell.
Screaming at me, where are the kids, where are the kids? I said, I don't know. I said, I haven't seen any of the kids.
My greatest fear was that he would have a secret David Koresh tunnel, and that the building would be hot. It would take a day or two to cool off.
Sound familiar? It should. Because today, it's the same playbook. Governments claim absolute authority. News networks sell fear. Social media divides us into sides. And every time we argue over whose truth is real, the people in power get stronger, while families, children, and communities get weaker. In 1993, the Davidians were locked inside a burning compound. In 2025, it's different walls, screens, algorithms, surveillance laws. And if you push too hard, if you step out of line, you risk your own standoff with those who hold power. That's the lesson Waco leaves us. When truth is controlled, people burn. And the fire isn't history. It's here, in our feeds, in our schools, in the stories we're told every day. Most will finish this story thinking Waco was just a tragedy in Texas. But you won't, because now you see the pattern, and you know the fire never really went out. Waco wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning of what happens when government stops seeing citizens as people and starts seeing them as enemies. After Waco, millions lost faith in Washington. They saw tanks crushing homes, children left to burn, and asked, if the government could do that to them, what could it do to us? That mistrust still echoes today. But Waco was not the beginning. The fire in Texas was fueled by another siege, one where federal agents surrounded a cabin in Idaho, and a mother was shot while holding her child. That story is called Ruby Ridge, and if you thought Waco was haunting, Ruby Ridge will show you how the fire truly began. Thank you for watching, and tune in next week to the Shadow Chronicle archive, where we continue to shine a light on the hidden stories that shock us all.
You're gonna see whether you believe this message. I'm ready to be delivered. I'm ready to go through the portals of darkness and death, and you're not. Let's see if you believe the message after so many years.